Hi there, thanks for joining this recording here for Agile and Scrum. We're going to talk about the Agile approach to software development as well as the Scrum piece of that. In today's session, we'll talk about the overview, we're going to go through some notes, we'll talk about the team that exists in Agile and Scrum. We'll also talk about patterns that you'll see. We're going to talk about one tool in particular called Kunagi, and then my information, or our information, is there for follow-up if you need it. Clear Insight FPM, there's our website, and my name's Bob Gill, and here's my information here. So let's get right into it. I want to start with the notes here. A key piece of Agile is the idea that we don't know what we don't know. It's okay to not know everything, and that comes from a lot of these principles here. So underlying a lot of what I'll talk about in the next couple minutes here are these principles. Self-organization, and that's the idea that we don't need to tell people exactly what to do every second of the day. We give them some kind of a high-level goal or objective, and they figure it out. And more importantly, a team figures it out. You can give a team a challenge, and the team will figure out a way to make it happen. Openness. So you can think of this as trust and honesty. So if someone is having a bad day or something's come up and their mind's not really in it, it's okay to say that. It's better to keep that openness and honest communication among the team because it'll help everyone be successful. Now, I mentioned the team, and you'll hear me mention that a fair bit, is there's a trust within the team that does not extend outside the team. So I would trust people on my Scrum team. I would tell them, you know what, I was out late with my wife last night, and maybe I had a little bit too much to drink, and I'm not feeling that good today. So you could tell that to your coworkers, but you can't tell that to folks outside the team. But there is an understanding there that you have to be professional, everything that you're doing. So those kind of things, openness does not mean unprofessionalism. Focus. So part of this is we really focus around what's going to be providing value and what do we need to deliver right now. So in other approaches, like waterfall being one of the most commonly compared approach, you may be planning for things that you're not going to work on for another year, or you need to do 6 months of development before you even get to the thing we're talking about today. So focus as a principle here is around let's organize and execute around our priorities and focus on what we're going to get done right now. And also commitment. So sometimes this is referred to as responsibility or accountability, and it's the idea that as a team, once we say we're going to commit to getting these things done, as a team we deliver that. As a team we're committed to that. It's not a set of individuals. We're not committing to tasks. We're as a team committing to that. We're going to get this done. And courage. A lot of the time it's challenging in any kind of software development project to be the one to put your hand up and say, I made a mistake. Or stand up and say, I know that someone made this design and they thought it was the greatest way to do it, but now that I'm looking at it, I think I see something wrong with it. I'd like to put my hand up and say that. So having the courage to say that is important. And team respect. If we don't respect each other, then we're not going to work well together. And that goes for people inside the team and outside the team. So that respect is a key principle here. Visibility is important. So Agile is not about hiding what you're doing from your coworkers or people outside the team. It's about giving everyone visibility and transparency into what we're doing, and getting rid of drama. So by providing this visibility and transparency, no one needs to worry about, is one person doing this thing, or maybe they're not doing it. We all know exactly what's going on. And humor. I think it's awesome that humor is a principle of Agile, but it actually is a principle in there that we all want to have fun when we're working. So we don't need to be all serious all the time. We're all working towards defined goals. We can have fun while we're doing it. And what is it we're trying to do? So there's this idea of a definition of done. Now unfortunately in this part here, I'm going to talk about some of these high-level concepts, and as we go along, it'll crystallize a little bit more. But in any project, and actually anytime you talk with someone, you ask them, "Are you done?" Well, sometimes that means different things to different people. Maybe you're asking a developer, is this feature done? And they might be thinking, well, I've written the code for it. You say, well, yeah, it's done. But maybe your definition of done is different than the developer's definition. Maybe you expect documentation to be done. You expect the testing to be done. You have a certain type of documentation you expect to be done by a particular person. And maybe you expect feedback to be given and that feedback to be incorporated before it really is done. So a simple thing like defining the word done and defining what we all mean by that so we're all on the same page is another key item that Agile looks at. And instead of having to go into really large requirements documents and articulating it to death, we focus in on individual features. So we can say, well, for this feature to be done, what exactly are we talking about? Now, some people make the mistake of saying, oh, well, Agile, we just have to put something together quickly and get it out the door and we'll be fine. And that's not the case. Because we all know that if we throw something together quickly and we put it out the door, then we're going to have to come back and pay that debt. At some point, someone, usually it's not the developer that wrote it, but someone in the future is going to have to come back and say, what was this person thinking when they wrote this? And how do I fix it now because it's broken? So this is where there's an idea of tech debt. And this is the idea that we want to do things with high quality from the beginning. So it may take a little bit longer, but we want to do it so that we don't need to come back to it in a period of time and redo it. So quality is a fundamental piece to this idea here. And if we encounter a bug from something that happened 6 months ago, that's tech debt. So it's kind of a key little buzzword we use in Agile that we say, you know what, that's related to something that should have been done differently in the past. We're not going to go back and blame someone for what did or didn't happen, but that's just tech debt. And it could be something as simple as, a server didn't work the way we wanted it to, or maybe the server went down. It doesn't need to be anyone's fault. It's just stuff that happens in technology. We need to figure it out and get over it. Chores and features. So I want to talk about how we have something called a chore and something called a feature. Features are what everyone wants us to do all the time. This is something that a user can see that provides new and updated functionality. We need to provide features, otherwise we're not adding value. And a feature is also something we can show or demonstrate. So maybe we want to, if I said versioning, maybe we want to copy some data around from one point to another. Maybe you want to have some kind of a new template or report. But these are things that, if you're dealing with a client, then you can demonstrate to them, you can show them and say, yeah, this is the thing you asked for. The other part of that is chores, and these are things something that needs to be done for system health and stability. So unfortunately, if we lived in a wonderful world where we can all just keep delivering features and that all works, then everyone would be happy. But the unfortunate reality is we need to do chores, otherwise our room gets messy. Thinking about where we live. If you don't clean up every once in a while, then the place gets messy. And any software solution really fits the same analogy there. So if you don't do some chores for health and stability, it's going to get messy and it's going to end up costing. It could create problems down the road. So this is something that you may not be able to demo to a user, but it is also important. So some examples would be tuning or optimization or maintenance and housekeeping. So by this here, the reason this comes into my notes list here is we're always trying to balance the list of chores and the list of features that we're working on. The product owner, the person who really wants to use this stuff, they always want features. They want to be able to do stuff with it. But we always need to balance that with chores to make sure that we're doing it with a high level of quality. Now, story points, and now at this point just think about it as a way to do estimation. We'll get into that more later on. and feedback is something that these last three really tie in together. If you use a waterfall approach, you make the assumption that you know everything at the beginning, and you try to articulate it as best you can. You put it into verbose documents that articulate very clearly what's expected, how you're going to test it, how you're going to sign off on it, and how it's going to be graded. Unfortunately, businesses change. So waterfall works really well for something like architecture. So if you're going to build a building and you need to know if the plan's done up front before you start pouring cement, waterfall works great. But for software, as people start working with it, new ideas come to them, and they start thinking, maybe our business doesn't really work like that. I know I said that. I know we wrote it out in a document, but now that I see it on a screen, maybe it's changed my mind, or maybe I misspoke. And instead of pointing the finger back and saying, you said this, Agile takes the approach of, okay, well, let's adjust. Let's figure out what the right way to do it to provide the best value. Yes, it's going to have an impact on the project, but we can manage that. Because the next piece is where you can really stop at any time. You hear me talk about sprints. Sprints are just a bucket of time, and I'll glaze over it right now, but think about it right now as just 2 weeks. And at the end of it, each sprint, at the end of every 2 weeks, we can stop. And that's an important point, because in other software projects, you get halfway through a project, you've got something that's not really usable. The only choice is to really keep going forward until you get to the end. Whereas Agile makes hasn't built into this approach that every 2 weeks, if something happens, you need to release what you've got to this point, you can do that. So it doesn't commit people to say, you're going to be here come hell or high water till the very bitter end. Every 2 weeks, if you see something that's going to be valuable for people, for your users, you can release that. And the last point here is one before we go ahead and get to something more interesting here is the tool is not the process. So I'm going to show you a tool later on, but this is just one tool of many that we can use for this process of Agile Scrum. And the process is important because it's the people in the process that make these things successful. So those are some notes. Now we'll get into a little bit more fun stuff here, talking about the team. Agile teams can be pretty simple. We've got a product owner, Scrum Master, and we action around priorities. That's pretty much it. I really team member. If you wanted to add another category here, you could call it team member. What's a product owner? A product owner is the person who sets external expectations. They're the single point of contact for anyone outside the team, answering business questions, planning releases, responsible for the product's success, and setting priorities. That's a lot to be on one person, but there's nothing technical here. The product owner doesn't need to be a technical person. They don't need to be a project manager. They don't need to be anything except a visionary. They need to be the person with this great idea that, right now processing these type of orders takes us 3 weeks. But if we did it this way, or we had a tool to do this for us, we could do it in 3 days. If they just have that vision, that's all they need to do. That's a key role in the success of providing business value to any of these type of projects. Now, Scrum Master is a different role. They're just a coach. They help people understand the process, remove roadblocks, and protect the team. So coaching is definitely a big piece of it. Every time you work on a project, you will encounter people that have never heard of Scrum before, never heard of Agile, have no interest in it, or too busy to even care about it. And it's the Scrum Master's role to engage them, help them understand it, so that the team can be successful. And for anyone on the team, wherever it may be, could be in code, could be in politics, could be in requirements gathering, but if there are roadblocks, the Scrum Master is responsible for helping that person out. They don't need to solve them, but they need to help remove roadblocks. And everyone else is actioning around priorities. So from a team perspective, hopefully that's pretty clear that the product owner is working on the vision, Scrum Master is helping everyone he can, and we're all just actioning around around our priorities. So that's really the team. Next is patterns. So I mentioned before about something called a sprint. So now let's get into a little more detail on, well, this is all well and good. We've got these airy-fairy ideals and philosophies that we want to work towards, but how does it actually work? So in a traditional waterfall approach, you'd have something called a milestone. And you'd say, we're going to finish development on this day. We're going to finish testing on this day. We're going to deliver we're going to go live on this day. And there's a project management of scope, schedule, cost, and quality. Whereas in Agile, there's still management of those things, but it's done differently. Here we talk about releases. And a release is really a period of time. You can think of it as almost synonymous as a milestone. But the difference between a release and a milestone is there's control over the release. The product owner gets to decide when they release something. Maybe it's ready early. Maybe it needs some more. Maybe it needs some more work, and the product owner is comfortable with the delay to get that higher quality. A release is, if you think of a release as a group of sprints, here we have, a release planning sprint, sprint 1, sprint 2, some number of sprints, and a release sprint. So we're going to go into detail on, I'm going to start from the release, which is the highest level. It's kind of a group of sprints. The first one is really a release planning sprint. This is really you're at the point of you just started a project and you kind of need to figure out, well, what needs to get done in this project. Well, the first thing is we figure out a product backlog. And a product backlog is a list of, you can think of it as a list of requirements, a list of stories. It's really probably the better description, but it's a list of stuff we could do. And it could be anything. There could be tons of stuff on there. Now the challenge is always prioritizing this stuff. Like with any project, many people are going to have different ideas and they're going to have different decisions on what's important and what's not so important. A story, ideally, is articulated as, as a something, or pardon me, as a someone, I want to something so that I can have some kind of benefit. So think of this as an administrator, I want to see who's logged into the system right now so that I can monitor users. And a story like that, it doesn't need to go into a large amount of detail. It can be as loose as that to give it some kind of structure to start with. We'll flesh it out as we go, but that's the story you start from. And starting with something like that, prioritizing and clarifying these things is challenging, and that's where the product owner comes in. Does this have enough information to be executed? How do we test it? How do we know it's done? What are the acceptance criteria for this one item? So we're not talking about acceptance criteria for the whole system. We're not doing a full UAT on absolutely everything. We're saying if we're going to call this one feature done, we're going to say this, in our case, an administrator can see who's logged in. What's the acceptance for that? And you'll see that by focusing in on the pieces, the whole becomes simpler. It's almost like a divide and conquer approach. And estimation involves the team. A challenge that folks have had in other approaches is you ask a project manager to go off and make estimates on different things that he or she may not be familiar with. And they might put some numbers down. They might even go ask some folks that, randomly, how long would it take to do X, Y, Z? And they'll throw out a number, but it could be that person's not involved in the project. There's no accountability there. So the team is involved in the estimation. And it's an important piece because if the team's not involved, then why would they ever commit to those estimates? It's not like they ever said they were involved. If they're involved, they're more committed. Things that we don't ask. How are we going to do this? We don't really worry about that right now. Freedom is left up to the team. We articulate the story, and once as a team we agree that the story can get done, to a certain point we leave the how up to the team. When? That's pretty simple. A sprint is a defined period of time, as a start day and an end day. So if we say a story is in the sprint, it's going to be done by the end of the sprint. So we're not going to say, a project manager would ask, are you going to be done on Wednesday or are you going to be done on Thursday? When is the end of the sprint? Where is this going to be done? Where doesn't matter. By using tools and collaboration and communication, we don't concern ourselves with where is this stuff getting done. Our focus is that it gets done. So let's backtrack a bit here. Let's say we've got our product backlog, and this is a list of our stories to get done. And now we're getting into a sprint. So you'll see a sprint falls into this kind of a pattern where we'll plan when this is really what, as a team, we agree, yep, this is reasonable. We can get these stories done in this sprint. Okay, yep, high five, we're all good to go, great. A Scrum team is usually 3 to 6 people. It's only team members. It's not, and this is the sprint planning meeting. No, we're not blaming in any of these meetings here. And I call that out because there's no point, when we're committed to these stories getting done as a team, we resolve roadblocks, but we don't care. We're not going to go back and be finger pointing because this is a safe environment. Sprint review. This is the idea that, okay, we're near the end of a sprint. We've finished everything. We feel it's done. High fives all around. But now we're looking for feedback. So we've done all the stories in the sprint, but this is an opportunity to go back to business or stakeholders or clients and say, did we get it right? What notes can we have to make this thing better? It's interactive. It gives anyone that is interested in this thing being successful an opportunity to course correct. And it's not a victory lap. So it's not just an opportunity it's not an opportunity to just high five and say, hey, we're great. But it's a way to make this thing better. Because now we've matured our understanding of what we're trying to do by 2 weeks. What have we learned in that 2 weeks that we can help, refine what we're working on, what we're building to be even better. And that helps us. That's the same approach here as in a sprint retrospective. At the end of every sprint, we ask 3 simple questions. What do we do well? What do we do not so well? And what do we want to change? And the idea here is, traditionally, you do a project post-mortem after a project's been around for 6 months, a year, 3 years, and you look back and you can say oh man, a year ago X, Y, Z happened, and wow, we ended up paying for that for the next 6 months. And at that point, unfortunately, it's just academic. There's not much you can do with that information to be successful. Here, we're building into our process that every 2 weeks we take a moment and say what went well, not so well, and what do we want to change. And it could be something as simple as, we're sending too much email. Or, I'm not really sure that these meetings are all that useful. Do we need all these meetings? There's a lot of really simple things that someone suggests the observation at the time, and it's a small course correction, but over a long period of time, those really add up. So this is why we try to leverage that. So we've talked about an overview and some notes, and we've kind of talked about the team, and now we've gone into some patterns. So let's look at a particular tool now, and I want to just reiterate that the tool and the process are different. I'm going to use Kunagi as a tool for Agile Scrum to illustrate these points, but you can use any one of a number of tools that are out there to get this done. So this is what Kunagi looks like. Sorry for a moment. Yeah, this is what Kunagi looks like. And I'm going to focus back into some pieces that we've talked about a little bit. A product backlog. So I talked about this a little bit. It says there's a list of stuff for us to get done, list of stories. So here are some stories here. Now, as a team member, I want to be able to see each person's status. As a team member, I want to be able to learn. As a team member, I want to be able to let the team know when I hit a roadblock. And for each one of these, there's different levels of detail. Could be some other things that are related to it. and there's an estimate here. So this estimate was provided by someone on the team, and whoever is the product owner, they get a chance to move these things around. Move them up, down, depending on what makes sense for the business at that time. When we get together for our sprint retrospective, our sprint planning, we decide, well, what do we want to take on? So the product owner has already moved these things around, and so the ones near the top, they should be able to say, you know what, I think those are the ones I want to get done. So if the product owner coming and saying, you know what, I'd really like it if we can get these 3 things done in the next sprint. Team, what do you think? Think we can do that? And the team gets a chance to ask questions, clarify different things, put in more detail, maybe split them out, refine them, reword them. But at the end of it, we end up with a couple that have been accepted. So we really pull them into a sprint. So we've taken a couple stories from our backlog into the whiteboard here. And this is what we're going to get done in this one sprint. As a team member, I want to be able to know when I hit a roadblock. So it could be, at this point, we're not asking, a project manager doesn't come in here and create tasks and assignment. Anyone on the team can come in here and say, you know what, for us to get that done, I know I need to build a report. And I know what the report is, I'm going to do it, I'm going to claim that. I go off and I work on it for a while, and I'm going to say it's done. Okay? And maybe someone else comes in on the team and they say, oh, they see this story, you know what, I know what that one is. And I can come in here and say, update code XYZ. XYZ. So I can claim that and mark that done. Now another piece of Agile here is that when a developer says that they're done, that doesn't mean it's done. We've talked about done as a definition first, so we should have clear expectations on what's going to be delivered, but the product owner is the one that really accepts or rejects this stuff. So in this case, for the demo purposes, I'm all the same person. But the product owner is the one that can come by and review these stories and see, oh, okay, I see a bunch of tasks have been done. It looks like the team thinks that we're done. Are we really done? And it's not done until the product owner can come in here and accept it. Gives it the old thumbs up. Then it's done. You know, and that's given us an opportunity to do all the tasks that are in this thing and make sure it's completed. So there's other pieces of Kunagi I'll go into maybe on a different presentation, but the piece I wanted to go through right now, the piece I wanted to go through so far was just that the product backlog is the set of stories we work from, always actioning around priorities and working on making sure we're delivering business value. So thanks for listening.